As mentioned, my name is Johna Salomon. I am the current regional director for the FS-ISAC, so the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center for the EMEA region. I am from Switzerland originally. You probably can't tell from my accent. I'm currently based between Germany, Spain, and a whole lot of other countries. And it's a very, great pleasure for me to be in Poland to be able to speak to you today. I'd like to spend, whoops, other way around, I told you. I'd like to talk a little bit about FS-ISAC, who we are, what our mission is, how we do it. More importantly, how I believe that we could work together more closely with the Polish financial sector. Not just the banking sector, but generally the entire financial industry in this country, the same way that we seek to work together more closely with the financial sectors of all the countries where we are active. I'd like to go a little bit over our history, our current activities, our scope, and maybe give you a little food for thought on how we could develop this interaction and cooperation with the goal of not just supporting the Polish financial sector's ability to protect itself against increasingly complex and widespread sources of risk and threats, but also to use your knowledge, your experience, and what you're observing on a daily basis in your work to help us protect our members elsewhere in the world. The FS-ISAC was originally founded in the United States in 1998 as one of a number of industry organizations designed to protect critical infrastructure sectors: healthcare, transportation, education, retail, and financial services. And I believe there were about 18 of these initially. Over the past, I'd say 10-15 years, it became increasingly clear that this is a global problem. And the FS-ISAC, I believe, ahead of all other information sharing communities, has sought to develop a truly global presence. We're a not-for-profit. We're founded by members. We're owned by members. We're run by members. We're not affiliated with any government, even though we maintain friendly contacts with a number of government agencies, if this helps our members. We use governments as sources of information. We use government agencies such as law enforcement, CERTs, intelligence agencies to support our activities in protecting our members. And we aim to be able to put our members in touch with the appropriate government agencies in every country where we work when this helps them protect themselves against attacks, fraud, other kinds of risk. Currently, I believe we're the largest by far industry association and community in the world of its kind. We have somewhere in between 7,000 and 7,500 members in something like 40 to 50 countries. I'm not sure of the exact numbers. I believe our members have staff in something around 100 countries in the world. I know in the EMEA region, there's something like 40 countries in total, not just in Europe, but also Africa and the Middle East. So why Poland? Why Eastern Europe? Why Europe in general? Why global? I believe that it's part of the mission of any information sharing community in the security sector to make sure that all of its stakeholders are protected. And I don't know how much influence or how much news that you hear here from, for example, the Colombian financial sector, or Japan, or what have you, for example, Hong Kong. But very often, I can say this from my own experience working in the senior security management of a large Swiss bank in Zurich. Eastern Europe and its financial services industry weren't always very strong on our radar. I think this is a mistake for a number of reasons. First of all, much of Eastern Europe, it's part of the European Union. They're NATO members, parts of Schengen. These are friendly, stable democracies, market economies. And I believe that all the financial organizations in this country have customers whose right it is to be protected from fraud, from attack, from theft, as well as the companies whose right it is to be able to work with their counterparts elsewhere in the world to better protect themselves. This is what we do. So we are not a service provider. I want to stress this. We are not a commercial organization. What we seek to do is to use the collective capabilities of the worldwide financial sector to help our members anywhere in each of the countries where we work to better protect themselves by using what other people have seen. Fundamentally, this takes two forms. The first one is communication. I've seen something. Help. What is this? This is new. I'm under attack. And the second one is, I've seen something. We took a look at it. This is what it is. Can you use this? This goes across all sorts of sources of risk and threat, from physical, for example, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, all the way to fraud and primarily cyber threat. We all know that this is a massive growing problem around the world. You've had vendors telling you scary stories for the last 25 years. I've been working in this industry for 20 years and it hasn't changed. It is, however, a fact that not only are the regulatory pressures on all of us rising to do something about these sources of risk and these threats, but also the factual attacks are changing. They're evolving. People are getting smarter. I wish they'd get a real job, because with the amount of effort that they invest in writing malware, they could probably do pretty well in the private sector, but it is what it is, so we have to deal with it. The concept of a neighborhood watch isn't so very well known outside, I think, English-speaking countries, but the fundamental idea, I think, is pretty clear. We help each other. It's a little socialist in that regard. We work together to share information, to share capabilities, to teach those who are not so good yet, to learn from those who are very good in order to better protect ourselves. FS-ISAC works with any kind of regulated financial services firm. So very often we hear mention of banks. It's not just banks. Banks are very often the most mature because they have a lot of money to spend on this stuff. But insurances, stock exchanges, broker-dealers, any kind of boutique financial services firms, any financial services organization that sees any types of cyber threat, physical threat, and other forms of attacks or menace that could cause risk, we help. The scope of this is massive. It's huge. The level of services, the diversity of organizations that we deal with, there's no talking around this, but somehow all of these can learn from each other in protecting themselves and protecting their neighbors from sources of systemic risk. How do we do this? Well, there are some service aspects of this community. All of these were developed in some form by our members, again, for our members. We maintain operational presence in the US, in Singapore. We're working on one in Colombia. We have people in the UK. Ultimately, I would like to see people in Australia, on continental Europe, maybe the Gulf as well. And the idea behind all of these staff, all of these organizations, we have a SOC in Poland as well that supports us. We'd like to expand its activities for all of Europe, is to develop our capabilities in sharing information, in collecting information, in analyzing information. Think of us as a complement to the money that you're spending on commercial security services, because what we're doing by communicating these threats, these analytical materials, these interactions between people at our physical events, threat briefings, think of it as a value multiplier for money that you're spending, for example, on a commercial security information provider. You're drawing information from these kinds of companies as a customer. What we're doing is we're letting you communicate with your peers in Poland, in Europe, around the world, to make sure that you better understand what does this mean for you strategically. A big part of what we do is events. So we have, for example, a European summit once a year. We had the last one in Barcelona. It was highly successful. We had people from, I think it was about 30 countries in attendance. I've organized 4 workshops confirmed this year. It's a lot of work. And I think we have 7 confirmed in continental Europe and the UK alone this year. I'm looking at possibly 2 or 3 more. We also run a series of exercises that are developed by members for members, called CAPS, cyber attacks against payment systems. Basically, if you can imagine a bunch of your security people get together on a call and think of the meanest things possible to have happen to a security organization, and they make that into an exercise. CAPS is anonymous, it's free, and it lets you benchmark yourself against other organizations. I encourage you to participate. You don't have to be an FS-ISAC member. It's something that we do for the entire financial sector as part of our mission to not just protect and help our members, but also generally the global financial industry. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to help you sign up. You can even just observe. Globally, we have 3 groups of these CAPS exercises. They are in Asia Pacific, in the Americas, and EMEA regions. And I think we currently have about 1,500 organizations already signed up for this exercise series in October. We also publish playbooks, so good practices, guides, process documentation developed by our member working groups. We do webinars with external partners and our members based on, for example, malware classes, new threat actors, good practices. We had one in Asia Pacific last year. I was working in Australia around fraud. We had another one around security intelligence automation. We have one coming up on the Internet of Things. We had one recently on Carbonac. It goes all across the board. If our members have an interest in learning something from either our partners or our other members, we will organize trainings and briefings on those topics. I mentioned before that we're not a government organization, any government. We do, however, as mentioned, maintain pretty good relationships with a lot of government agencies, again, when this is useful for our members. So we get information from certs. When a member has, for example, a takedown that they have to have done somewhere in the world, we want to make sure that we have a contact with the correct police agency. We're doing a roundtable for financial services plus law enforcement in Barcelona this September. In fact, we have a member meeting in September 4th in Barcelona. We have one on September 13th in the Netherlands. Anybody is welcome to join. If they're from a financial services firm, please let me know. We'd love to have you. But our relationships with our government partners means that we have a much faster interaction, a much faster communication channel with, for example, an intelligence agency or a CERT or a law enforcement agency when they need to help the financial sector with something. We do not tell them anything. If one of our members wants help and they want us to tell something to a law enforcement agency, we'll do that. But unless a member wants us to do that for them, we don't talk back to them. A couple of examples. Anybody in here heard of Swift? Small company in Belgium? Yeah, exactly, yeah. If I hear Swift, I don't want to hear Swift anymore this year, so please make sure that Poland, you don't have any Swift issues. Thank you very much. But obviously, there were a few major issues. There was a lot of misunderstanding, and anytime a senior manager hears Swift, they go crazy, right? Because if there's a problem with Swift, if they suspect that there's been an incident or a breach, the world is ending. That's exactly what happened. Swift itself was not breached as far as we know, but obviously people are nervous about infrastructures around Swift terminals. They're worried about Swift-related payment systems. So we got a bunch of our members together in various countries around the world. We had Swift people on calls. We had briefings from external partners, making sure that everybody understood exactly what happened, what didn't happen, how do they respond to it, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again. We published a paper at the end of this to make sure that people understand how to better secure their infrastructures, not just Swift terminals, but everything around these. Again, the result of a member working group working with affected organizations and Swift staff to make sure everybody has the information they need for potential future events. This is not just important for Swift-related events, it's also important for other critical payments infrastructures. The Olympics, not often something seen as directly relevant to the financial sector, but obviously we have a huge amount of financial traffic. We have payments going through. We have sponsorship. There's questions about terrorism. There's questions about hacktivism. A lot of people in Brazil were not happy about the money that was being spent on it. I'm not here to judge anything, but we did have a duty to protect the organizations that were associated with the Olympics. We put together a number of groups, a number of communications channels to ensure that everything went smoothly, and we did not see any effects from any cyber attacks, any threat actors being able to cause disruption as a result. We work together with a lot of organizations, as mentioned, government organizations, but also industry associations. This includes CERTs, banking associations, standards groups, you name it. Anytime, again, there is value for our members in the financial sector to cooperate with such a structure, we will do it. One of the reasons I'm here to talk to you is very, very bluntly, I would like to develop a closer relationship with the Polish financial sector, like a lot of other such sectors in Eastern Europe. There's two reasons for this. I mentioned earlier that, I think there's an ideological mission that we have to do a better job reaching out to all countries which share our values, which share our systems, which share our types of infrastructure and our approach to commerce and politics and what have you. But I think also importantly, you are seeing things that we're not seeing yet in South America and Asia. So I would like to explore, and I've already done this with several gentlemen from the Polish Banking Association, the idea of developing a relationship along these lines with a collective group of Polish financial services firms. This would make it easier for FS-ISAC as a worldwide community to share information transparently with Polish financial firms, but also for yourselves to reach out easily and quickly if there is ever a major incident affecting the Polish sector. Now, there may have been some major incidents affecting the Polish sector earlier this year that some of us may be familiar with. I'm not going to name anything, but it did turn out that such a hypothetical event had an impact and an interest for members elsewhere in the world. So we saw this hitting regulators and central banks in other countries. Thanks to personal relationships with representatives from Poland, we were able to reach out and also bring feedback back to these colleagues in Poland from what we learned elsewhere. I would like to formalize that. I would like to develop channels of communication with our intelligence staff in the UK, with our SOC, with our partners. When something hits you, when something hits your neighbors, when something hits another European country, or just an individual organization, that we have the relationships that let us contact another CERT, a law enforcement agency, a security solutions provider to help fix it very, very quickly. This can also be strategic. This can also be solutions, approaches to standards. I mentioned security automation before. Any Intel operations people in here? Ops guys? Yeah, some ops guys there. How do you feel about cut and pasting indicators into a spreadsheet from email lists? Yeah, they're smiling. I wouldn't be smiling. I hate that, right? So we need to cut down on this. It's too slow. It's inefficient. So we need to do a better job participating in standards organizations and helping our members and our stakeholders in the financial services industry protect themselves more quickly, more efficiently, and more accurately by using automation tools and any kind of means out there to make sure that the analysts aren't copy and pasting indicators, but they're actually analyzing. How about that? Everything is based on trust. Everybody in here, I think, is familiar with traffic light protocol. Fundamentally, without trust, nothing can work. We can't share information. This means that if I say something is TLP red, it stays in the room. Again, with almost 7,500 members, I'm familiar of very, very few breaches of TLP and none that were malicious. Usually somebody copy-pasting an indicator on a site asking for help or something. When somebody does this, we approach this under the idea that we are all adults, that we understand that confidentiality and trust is required. And we have talked to people and we say, look, don't do this again. This is really destructive, and they don't do it again. All of our meetings are under TLP, all of our materials are under TLP, and the reason for it is it works. It lets us share information in trusted groups, not just with all of FS-ISAC, but also in subgroups, different countries. The Dutch, for example, the Norwegians, the Spanish, they all have their individual trust groups in Europe. The UK has the FSIE. There's a whole bunch of these. They share amongst each other, even though they're FS-ISAC members. And TLP helps them understand clearly that this information stays in this circle, basta, does not go out. There's no obligation to share anything with FS-ISAC or other FS-ISAC members when you join FS-ISAC. Most members understand that it's beneficial for them if they share information. They get back what they put in. This takes a while. It's natural. When you meet a new person, you don't want to tell them about your family history right away. It takes a while to trust them. It takes a while to get to know them, to understand what they'll do with it. This is one of the reasons why we have member events around the world, to put faces to names so people can meet each other personally, go and have some pizza and some beers together. After about 7 or 8 beers, they're your best friend, and you're probably going to share a bit more information with them. Fundamentally, though, it all boils down to making sure that everybody understands TLP and everybody accepts that everybody else understands TLP and respects it. A few mechanisms, I touched on these before. Exercises, meetings, white papers, and briefings, communications channels, email exchange are the major ones. There's a lot of working groups. There's a lot of trainings that we offer with external partners or members. But the idea is that these are just a support for the fundamental idea of community and sharing. Information exchange, I don't care if it's at a member meeting, in a TLP-read session, over an email list, somebody asking a question in a briefing call, me boring you for 25 minutes here about FS-ISAC. Any kind of information sharing requires a certain level of services and infrastructure to work. We provide this based on what our members request. I think I just pushed a button I shouldn't have. I'd like to very quickly go, I've only got a few minutes left, over what's happening in Europe and around the world. Just an idea of where we have staff. There's more to come. I wish there were a lot more to come. I need about 5 of me in Europe right now. If you know anybody in Poland who'd like to help fund that, please let me know. I'd buy you a couple of drinks. I'd be very happy. There's a lot under development. I see this expanding tremendously. We've just recently put somebody in the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK, which is a big deal. We're building up an intelligence center with 9 people in Singapore right now. We're working on an intelligence organization in Latin America. And I believe that within the next year or 2, we're going to see significant increase in our intel staff in Europe, as well as people like myself who help make sure that things are working. Our 3 main regions, you can see here, each of these has member committees that develop strategy for the organization and the community, and also discuss confidential threat issues, actors, threat levels for the region, and that work together globally to make sure that we're coordinated across the world. Events, you see these here. I just finished Madrid and Brussels. I didn't sleep a whole lot. We've got 2 more coming up in September and our summit in October. Ultimately, I would like to have more activity around Central and Eastern Europe. I'm trying to talk to the Austrians about that as well. If we can get more Polish members on board, I'd love to have some member meetings or dinners here. If anybody wants to host one of these, I'm happy to organize. But again, the idea is to make sure that our members in various parts of Europe are able to get together in a room or around a table in a comfortable atmosphere, maybe have some free drinks or dinner, but talk openly amongst each other. Some activities, this needs updating. We've got an IoT, Internet of Things, threat briefing call. Regularly, we have a number of email lists for different regions, including EMEA. We've got a number of topic-specific lists, such as ATM security. We're working on a threat intelligence capability working group. I was talking to Artur about this recently, where members can both teach other members about how they're building their threat intel model, as well as learn from them on how they do it. The 2 standing committees, just to give you an idea of the countries that are represented. I'm currently talking to 2 CISOs from South Africa and from Denmark to join as well. They're very representative. We have people from a number of external organizations involved that are also members, so CERTs, for example, financial CERTs. There is not enough Central and Eastern European representation in there. And that's a gap I aim to fill in 2017. Some focal areas, as mentioned, Eastern Europe is on there. Building relationships with governments, building relationships with law enforcement, strategic partners, and others. And basically, I would like to hear from you what you would like to see from an organization like ours and a community like ours around the world. If you're a member, you own it, you run it, you control it. It's based on your requirements that we are able to develop what we do. I'm not going to go into the details as I'm out of time, but I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I think I'm out of business cards. I gave them all to Artur here to pass around. I have to unfortunately drive back to Berlin afterwards. So I thank you very, very much for your time and your kind attention, and I welcome any contact, any questions or feedback from you, and I hope to spend a lot more time in Poland working with the financial sector to learn from you and to help you also develop your capabilities. Thank you very much. Wish you a good conference.